Hello, everyone. My name is Ezra, otherwise known as E-Soup, and we are continuing Case File today. The weather in a lot of places is stormy and not so great, and I don't think it's raining right now here, but I think it's supposed to. And my internet is currently behaving, but I hope that it continues to behave. And if it does, if we're so lucky, then we will be reading chapters 81 to 84 today. And where we left off was a great dramatic moment to leave off because He finished filming his scenes and he really wanted Xie Ching-chung to watch and pay attention. And then he looked around for him, like, after filming, and Xie Ching-chung was, like, walking away in the rain. Oh, Saikin, you made it. You even had time to grab a snack. That's awesome. Hello, Nina. Hello, Sua. I'm very, very excited for the chapter that we are about to read because it's called I Kissed You in the Rain. It's just like the perfect... It sounds like the perfect dramatic moment. And also, speaking of rain, I can't help but be reminded of the cover art, where it looks like they're in a flood. So, I don't know what that's about. Maybe we'll find out this stream, maybe we won't find out until the last stream of this book, which will be on Wednesday, and I can't believe we're getting through so quickly already. Like, we're already almost at the end of Volume 3, and I don't know where the time went. But, I'm gonna get started. We are on page 319 for Chapter 81, I Kissed You in the Rain. Xie Ching-chung had left directly from the film set. He hadn't even returned to the director's tent. Luckily, this was already the final take of the night. After he watched his performance from the monitors and spent some time speaking to the director, He began to gather his things to leave. It was at this very moment, however, that Chen Man appeared at his side. It turned out that Chen Man had ended up staying. Seeing that everyone had returned except for Xie Ching-chung, who had disappeared without a trace, he rushed over to ask He, "Have you seen Xie go?" When He didn't respond, Chen Man repeated his question, his voice taking on a somewhat anxious quality. He looked up slowly as he pulled the zipper of his backpack closed. "Can't you just call him? Why are you asking me?" "His phone's dead. He asked to borrow my charger earlier, but I didn't get the chance to give it to him." But before Chen Man could finish speaking, he was struck by the shards of ice in the youth's eyes and abruptly fell silent. He flashed a smile that was sweet yet menacing. "You're the one who lost him, so why are you asking me? Officer Chen, aren't you much closer to him than I am?" With that, his smile swiftly disappeared. His shifting moods were truly abnormal. He slung his backpack over one shoulder and walked away with his hands shoved in his pockets. If He had to guess, Xie Ching-chung had probably taken a quiet side path and wouldn't have gotten very far. Therefore, after climbing into the production team's hired van, he instructed the driver to take the byway back. It rarely rained so heavily during the winter. The downpour had blurred the windows of the car, but He could still easily recognize the figure a short distance away. Just as he'd expected, he instructed the driver to pursue him. The driver couldn't quite make sense of He's erratic moods, but from a glance at him in the rearview mirror, he thought He seemed fairly unconcerned. Laoban must consider this man an eyesore, the lackey thought, and so he floored the gas pedal. Sorry. Sorry, I'm like, this is a crazy assumption for this driver to make. He Lao Ban must consider this man an eyesore, the lackey thought, and so he floored the gas pedal, deliberately speeding through a large puddle of water and splattering Xie Qingchung's whole body in muck. Like, even if you're driving someone around and you think that they don't like a guy, and you're driving up to that person, why would you do that? It's not like he told you to do that. Xie Qingcheng stopped in his tracks. With his hands still stuck in his pockets, he turned around, his handsome face ashen and his once crisp windbreaker dripping with muddy water. Warm air gusted over him as the hired van's automatic door slowly slid open, but when he saw who was inside, the warmth only served to make Xie Qingcheng's cold face frost over, with an even thicker layer of ice. Do you find this amusing, He Yu? Every word he spat out was like a blade of ice. Are you a child? He Yu sat inside the stopped van. Although he was being cursed out, he felt a twisted thrill from the bottom of his heart. The reason Xie Qingcheng was in such a wretched state, the reason he was so angry, the reason for this extreme reaction, it was all because of him. Well, it was also because of the driver, who you did not tell to do that. I know He Yu doesn't care, and in fact, he's amused by it. But if someone is, like, driving me around and they, like, did that to a person, I don't know, like, that's so unprofessional. It's like a fireable offense. Chen Man was a fool. Whether he brought him milk tea or offered him kindness and warmth, Xie Qingcheng would always respond with bland indifference. Those 7 years of He Yu's life served as a testament to this. It was no use treating someone like Xie Qingcheng well. Treating him with gentleness was even more of a waste. The man had no heart. No matter how you tried to warm him up, he would never thaw. The only way to force that lofty gaze to land on you was through cruelty and humiliation. He Yu felt that his own methods were much better. No one could obtain Xie Qingcheng's love, but at least he had managed to obtain Xie Qingcheng's hatred. It failed to occur to He Yu that his preoccupation with Xie Qingcheng's love wasn't normal in the first place. With an indolent expression on his gently beautiful face, he crossed his long legs, sat lazily back in his seat with his fingers interlaced, and looked over Xie Qingcheng's face as he stood in the torrential downpour. Professor Xie, it's raining so heavily, he said. How could you leave without an umbrella? Please get in the car. I'll give you a ride back to the hotel. Fuck off. He Yu kept smiling. You still have such a fiery temper, even when you're soaked through. I wonder who provoked you so. Xie Qingcheng obviously couldn't say that it had been He Yu's lines that had provoked him. The driver was still listening eagerly from the front of the car. Seeing him completely soaked through, cold and seething with hatred, satisfied some deep desire in He Yu's heart. He picked up a black umbrella with a carbon fiber handle from the seat and stuck his hand out of the car. The umbrella opened with a swoosh, and the sound of the rain grew louder as raindrops fell in an agitated stutter over the umbrella's surface. He remained sitting inside the van, but he leaned over as he handed the umbrella to Xie Qingcheng. If you don't want to get in the car, you can have this. After a moment's consideration, he extended his long legs. We drink again. Pressing one foot against the outer edge of the car and leaving the other dangling as he bent down even further to press his lips against Xie Qingcheng's ear. He murmured in a voice that only Xie Qingcheng could hear. Guh, do you really hate me so much? Xie Qingcheng was normally a highly unruffled person, but no matter how calm he was, there was no way he could stand the open yet veiled provocation of He Yu sharing their conversations from that night in the club's private room for all to hear. Not to mention, He Yu's words now carried the same blistering undertone of mockery. Unable to bear it any longer, Xie Qingcheng lashed out and delivered a vicious slap across He Yu's face. The driver flinched at the sharp sound, but did not dare turn his head. He Yu's face jerked slightly to the side from the force of the blow. After a moment, he slowly turned back to Xie Qingcheng. The sudden slap had Xie Qingcheng's full strength behind it, and several fingerprint bruises immediately surfaced in its wake on He Yu's pale cheek, but He Yu didn't care. Instead, he grabbed Xie Qingcheng by the wrist, slowly rubbing against the tattoo hidden beneath a layer of cloth. Then he bared his snowy white teeth in a smile. It hurt so much. He bent even lower, as though he wanted to shove Xie Qingcheng down. My right cheek's over here. Would you like to hit that too? Xie Qingcheng gritted his teeth. I see you're unafraid of pain, but surely you're not so far gone that you've completely lost your sense of shame. Why should I feel shame? Pulling away, He Yu suddenly tilted the umbrella he had been holding over their heads to the side. The torrential rain splashed over the ground, soaking through the arm and leg that He Yu had extended out of the car, and pouring over Xie Qingcheng. He Yu held the black umbrella steadily aloft at a slant, using it to block the driver's line of sight. I think the way we are right now is pretty great, he said. With no further warning, he yanked Xie Qingcheng closer by the wrist. Under the cover of the heavy downpour, there was hardly any distance between them as they stared at each other. He Yu's gaze stroked over Xie Qingcheng's dark, rain-drenched brows and thick lashes again and again, the expression in his eyes so intense it seemed like he wanted to press the line of his sight into Xie Qingcheng's blood, flesh, and marrow. The molten lava in his heart had been bubbling for a long time. Under the flimsy barrier of the black umbrella's thin fabric, he suddenly dipped his head, and as the heavy rain poured down, he captured Xie Qingcheng's lips in a kiss. Finally, he was kissing him again. The moment their lips met, a buzzing sound echoed through He Yu's mind. It was as if an electric shock had passed through his entire body. He felt nearly numb with pleasure. He hadn't planned on kissing Xie Qingcheng here. His body had reacted on instinct. But as he kissed him wetly, he came to the unexpected realization that this kiss was completely different from the ones he'd shared with the actress when he'd acted out his sex scene. He thought that he'd done quite well at acting out that scene, but now he could see how incredibly ignorant he had been. A deep, depraved kiss, a passionate outpouring of emotions. How could it possibly be as he had portrayed it? There was no way that a man who was overcome by lust and cloaked in despair would be able to do what he'd done in that scene and finish things off so easily. A kiss like this was a fuse, burning away at his rationality. He hated Xie Qingcheng so much, he wanted to step out of the car at once, shove him into the narrow, mud-covered alley, and crush his flesh to pieces, to pound him to death in the frantically falling rain. And yet, at the same time, he pitied him so much he wanted to drag him into the car without a care for anything else, take his shivering body into his arms, strip him of his drenched clothes, and press his own scalding heat to his icy chill so that he could warm him up properly, from the inside out. This was what it felt like to stifle one's emotions for so long. He hadn't fully grasped this feeling back when he'd been acting out his sex scene with that actress. In the end, his performance had been utterly fake. A warm mouth sucked on thin, chilly lips, the sweet wetness of rainwater mixing into their kiss. Thankfully, the rain was very loud, and with the large umbrella blocking his view, the driver couldn't see anything. But Xie Ching-chung couldn't move. He was unspeakably shocked and furious, but he couldn't move. After all, He Yu was holding the umbrella. The little bastard could let go any time he wished. He couldn't make a sound, either. If the driver found out that they were kissing behind the umbrella in this great downpour, the only person he'd be embarrassing would be himself. Xie Ching-chung's only option was to bite down hard on He Yu's lip, hoping to hurt him enough he'd let go. But all that got him was the heavy taste of blood, and a deeper entanglement, as He Yu sucked at his lips even more intensely. He Yu kissed him too deeply, as though he wanted to drain all of Xie Ching-chung's breath from his lungs, as though he was trying to steal away his life. Xie Ching-chung wasn't sure how much time had passed by the time the kiss finally ended. His face was very calm, but his fingertips trembled slightly. If he'd had a knife on hand, he might have sliced through this crazed dragon's throat. He Yu, meanwhile, stared at Xie Ching-chung, his eyes shining with water as if they'd been moistened by the storm. His bottom lip dripped with fresh blood. He let go of Xie Ching-chung's wrist, but lifted his fingers to run them slowly over the man's face. His pitch-black brows and eyes, the handsome lines of his profile. Crooking his fingers, he swept them over the high bridge of the man's nose, then lingered over the thin lips that were stained dark red by his kisses. He pressed his knuckles against Xie Ching-chung's mouth as Xie Ching-chung said to him in an utterly frigid voice, "Are you done?" He Yu could feel the tepid heat of his breath as he spoke. Oh, was there really still warmth in this man's body? He stared at Xie Ching-chung in silence for a moment, gathering his emotions into some semblance of order, until the only thing remaining in his eyes was mockery. "You see," he said so softly, "why should I feel any shame when you're the one who's afraid of being discovered by the driver? The one who refuses to admit to our rotten affair. None of this matters to me. I don't care about any of it." Sure you don't. Xie Ching-chung's lips were still stained with blood, yet his eyes were cold as ice. "If you're done with your ridiculous rampage, you can leave." He couldn't have been colder. He was no longer even willing to say something as emotional as, "fuck off." He Yu didn't reply, only moved his hand away from Xie Ching-chung's mouth. His knuckles were still stained with the blood from Xie Ching-chung's lips. But he lifted his hand, leaned down slightly, and looked up at him through his lashes before gently kissing the redness on his own fingers. Xie Ching-chung was at a loss for words. As he kissed the blood, He Yu's unwavering, unblinking gaze never left his eyes. "Xie Ching-chung, I'm not used to getting any affection from ordinary people, so even your hatred and blood can bring me joy." With that, he straightened up, returned the umbrella to its position over Xie Ching-chung's head, and passed him the handle. Instead of taking it, Xie Ching-chung knocked it to the ground, sending up a spray of water. "He Yu, do you know where you're sick? It's not your head." Under the falling rain, Xie Ching-chung leveled him with a frigid stare. "It's your heart. You're sick in the heart. You take blood for medicine and hatred as treatment. If you carry on like this, no one will be able to save you. Take a good look at yourself right now. You are pursuing your own fucking destruction. You are lowering yourself to something less than a beast. I'm disappointed in you. I feel like all the time and effort I spent on you in the past was a complete waste of my time. That time was actually very valuable to me, but now I feel like I might as well have fed it to a dog." Hi, Henry. Perfect place to catch up to. Yeah, I do get the Ivan vibes from this. When Xia Qingcheng finished speaking, he walked away without a backward glance, taking a narrow pedestrian pathway that was impossible to follow by car. He Yu licked his lips, his almond eyes dark. He slowly sat back down inside the car, using a handkerchief taken from within the vehicle to slowly wipe at his dripping hair. The driver could see through the rearview mirror that his lips were bright red, seemingly covered in blood. Even though he didn't know how the blood had gotten there, he was still terrified. "Hello, Ban," the driver said quietly. Are we leaving now?" That was the only question he dared ask. Some stones were better left unturned. Of course, He Yu smiled, tossing the handkerchief away with a casual flick of his hand, as his indifferent eyes turned eerily dark. He looked like a deranged madman, but somehow he still sounded perfectly courteous, utterly refined, and completely polite as he said, "Please take me back to the hotel. Thank you." The driver shuddered. The heating was on inside the car, but for a moment he felt a hair-raising chill, a shock that sent sweat beading all over his back. When he returned to the hotel, He Yu examined himself in the mirror. The blood on his lip had already dried into a dark scab. He touched it gently, thinking about everything that had just transpired. Xia Qingcheng said he took blood as medicine and hatred for treatment. How ridiculous. As if he wanted to be like this. Was love an option for him? Was true medicine? Was there a bridge that could lead him back toward regular society? Xia Qingcheng had even said that the time and effort he'd spent on him was very valuable, that he now felt like he'd fed it to a dog. He really didn't need to be so polite. In all likelihood, in the depths of his mind, Xia Qingcheng probably thought he'd done worse than feed his efforts to a dog. At least a dog would still seek their master's affection. Xia Qingcheng should have cursed him out as an ungrateful wolf biting the hand that fed him. Really, he could have spoken much more viciously. At any rate, He Yu didn't care anymore. He'd long since stopped caring. When Xia Qingcheng left him, when that video was played on the broadcasting tower, when Xia Qingcheng said the lives of the mentally ill were unworthy of mention, when He Yu told him again and again that he'd fallen ill, but never received a word in response. By then, he'd already stopped caring. In fact, he felt that if they continued to torment each other like this until they died, that would be a perfectly good conclusion. But what He Yu couldn't escape was the fact that when he'd kissed Xia Qingcheng earlier, he'd been acting entirely on his own inexplicable physical impulse. This wasn't the same as the time he kissed him in the bar. That had been a kiss with some goal in mind, as at the time he'd wanted to force Xia Qingcheng into agreeing to his request beneath the watchful eyes of the crowd. But earlier, that kiss hidden behind the umbrella, it seemed completely meaningless, an action born of the heart. It didn't seem like something a normal man would do. Still, he forcibly assuaged his pathetic dignity, telling himself that this was perfectly rational, that it was just the same as fucking Xia Qingcheng. The only reason he kissed Xia Qingcheng was to make him suffer. There was no love whatsoever in an action like that. He lay in bed, mulling it over again and again, only to discover that he couldn't manage to calm down, that there was no way he could fall asleep. He Yu swore quietly and rose to go to the bathroom, slamming the frosted glass door closed. In the steaming heat of the shower, he thunked his forehead against the icy tile. The lights were off in the bathroom, so his clearly defined profile was shrouded in darkness. The water from the shower had pounded against his back, splashing all over his flesh and blood body. He closed his eyes, thinking, seriously, what the hell? He needed to maintain calm for his own good, but since the broadcasting tower incident, his flare-ups had been so frequent and long-lasting that his sickness had begun to worsen. Under normal circumstances, a little bit of conflict and provocation like what had happened today wouldn't affect him too much. But He still had a flare-up. After cooling off in the shower, he managed to calm himself down, but even at midnight, his sickness was still pouring violently out. As the number on the thermometer approached 39, the urge to see bloodshed and the craving for destruction within him began to surge higher and higher. He took a handful of pills and just barely managed to make it through the latter half of the night. As dawn broke after a sleepless night, He finally heard faint sounds of movement coming from next door. He dug out his phone and glanced at the schedule. It said that it was Chen Man's last day providing guidance on set, so the scenes that required his oversight would end today. Shooting for his first scene began quite early. The schedule said that they'd be departing at 6 in the morning. The noise was probably from Chen Man. He turned over in his blankets and swiped further down on his phone to see that Chia Ching-chung needed to stay on set until just before the new year. Which was to say, after today, the ambient percentage of Chen Man PM 2.5 in the air would fall to 0. Chen Man would be gone. The only person left next door would be Chia Ching-chung. At this realization, like a desert blessed by rainfall, Yu's state of mind showed a sudden improvement after an entire night's worth of torment at the hands of his psychological Ebola. Or rather, it would have, if not for what he heard Chia Ching-chung saying through the wall. Okay. That's the end of the chapter. We're on page 331 for chapter 82, which is called And Ran into Someone from the Past. Wonder who that could be. It's fine. I'll see you off, Chia Ching-chung said. Guh, you should sleep some more, Chen Man told him. You hardly got any sleep last night. Enough nonsense. Let's go. I'm not doing anything today, so I can rest when I get back. Chia Ching-chung paused. Where's your suitcase? In the wardrobe. Do you need to bring it with you? Or will you come back to get it in the afternoon? I'm not coming back. I'm leaving directly from the set after the shoot. My mom said my grandpa's coming to Huzhou tonight. Okay, Chia Ching-chung said. I'll hold on to it for you. Let's go. The door opened and closed again. The sound of 2 sets of footsteps, along with the faint scraping of the suitcase's wheels, gradually faded into the distance. Yu suddenly sat up in bed, his hair disheveled. He hadn't misheard. Chia Ching-chung was accompanying Chen Man to Group B. Yesterday, Chen Man had come to see Chia Ching-chung, and today, Chia Ching-chung was sending him off. That goddamn homosexual Chen Man had to go and disgust him one last time before he left. Yu's desire to stay in bed and play dead vanished immediately. Even though he was still burning with fever, violently bloodthirsty urges blazing through his heart, he decided to get up and leave his room. He wanted to go to the set, too. The last scene where Chen Man was providing technical guidance was set at a police academy. It featured a large ensemble of a few hundred extras who all required supervision, and it was being filmed on site at the nearby campus of an actual police academy. By the time Yu had freshened up and arrived on set, The first rays of dawn were already peeking over the horizon. They had just finished filming one section, and while the crew was blocking out the scene with one group of extras, the others were resting. It was so crowded that He Yu didn't see Xie Qingcheng at first. He had to look around the whole area before he discovered the man standing with Chenman under a white plum blossom tree. Xie Qingcheng stood with his back facing him, saying something to Chenman beneath the dawning sky full of rosy clouds. He Yu was far enough away that he could only hear faint snatches of their conversation. "It'll be fine, Ge. It's just a performance, and they won't film your face." Xie Qingcheng was saying something, but He Yu couldn't hear him clearly. Chenman's smile grew brighter. "Just think of it as humoring me, as a gift for wrapping up my part in the film." This time, Xie Qingcheng's voice was audible. "You're not an actor, so why would you need a rap gift?" What sort of rap gift had Chenman asked for? As He Yu walked closer, it all became very clear. At that very moment, Xie Qingcheng also happened to turn around. He Yu was no longer faced with that straight-backed silhouette, but instead those handsome features. He couldn't help but stop in his tracks. Xie Qingcheng was wearing a police uniform. Is He Yu gonna have a uniform thing? I can see that there's art on the next page. His cap was pulled a bit low, hiding his dark, distant eyes in the shadows beneath its brim, while the silver-buckled belt pulled in the crisp line of his waist. This navy blue winter uniform made his figure look exceptionally tall and slender, sharpening his cold, austere aura until it was utterly solemn and severe. As he turned around beneath the white plum blossom tree, it was impossible to say whether it was the flowers or the man that had been more thoroughly chilled by the cold. Crisp waist is new, yeah. Also, you're right, Henry. It's funny, but it's also sad that He Yu does not know what is normal for a friendship. If you think too hard about it, it's, yeah. It's a little depressing. The wind rose, stirring up a flurry of plum petals that drifted down and dusted over Xie Qingcheng's uniform like pure white snow. As he glanced to the side and caught sight of He Yu, he started slightly in surprise, before raising his hand to straighten his hat and looking briskly away from He Yu once more. He really didn't want to see him. He Yu hardly needed to rack his brain to understand why Xie Qingcheng was dressed up like this. Although the actors needed to go through makeup and costuming ahead of time, it was actually very simple to make them look like modern police academy students. It didn't require much effort at all, especially for someone like Xie Qingcheng, who looked good in anything, and was ready for the part with just a change of clothes. He had come to keep Chenman company, but he felt awkward just standing by the side doing nothing, so he'd agreed to be an extra in the scene as a small favor to Chenman. He was just filling in a spot in the crowd for a wide-angle shot, so his face wouldn't be clearly seen. If he'd been asked to play any other minor role, Xie Qingcheng might not have agreed. But this navy blue uniform was the cherished childhood dream that he'd ultimately abandoned. He could at least take advantage of the chance to wear the full outfit in this production as a way to indulge his old ambition. It's, here's the art. Yep. He Yu had gotten used to seeing him in his doctor's clothes, which made him look very scholarly. Though his figure in the snow-white coat was ice-cold, it nevertheless emanated a somewhat pure and holy aura. He never could have imagined that a police uniform would suit Xie Qingcheng even more. He was so upright, whether it was the epaulets, the belt, the silver buttons, or the dark navy formal dress blues. They all matched his aura of competence perfectly. The police uniform was much more form-fitting than a doctor's, revealing the beautiful, clean lines of his broad shoulders and long legs. Not a signed cop at birth. His whole figure was like a frosty dagger on a winter's night, sharp and frigid, with moonlight glancing off its icy blade. He Yu's mental illness had given him a high fever, but he was already used to such high temperatures. It couldn't affect him all that much. But at that moment, it felt as though all the blood in his body had caught fire. Xie Qingcheng had put on this uniform at Chen Man's request. He was wearing it for Chen Man to see. If He Yu hadn't followed them here, he wouldn't have been able to witness this magnificent view. The thought gnawed away at He Yu's heart. Even though Xie Qingcheng clearly had "keep your nonsense away from me" written all over his face, He Yu still made his way over. "Xie Qingcheng," he said. Chen Man turned his head, and the smile on his face stiffened as soon as he caught sight of him. "Can I help you with something?" He Yu didn't bother to look at young Master Chen at all. He stopped just one step shy of Xie Qingcheng to gaze at the man before him through lowered lashes. Then he lifted his hand. Slap. Xie Qingcheng grabbed his wrist. Dressed in solemn navy blue, Xie Qingcheng's aura seemed even more cutting than usual. Staring at He Yu, he repeated Chen Man's question. "Can I help you with something?" He Yu calmly allowed him to hold his wrist in his grasp. He was sick, burning up from head to toe. He was sure that Xie Qingcheng could feel it when he grabbed his wrist. They stared at each other, just like that. He Yu had no idea how solid Xie Qingcheng's heart had been frozen. The heat from his illness and fever was being transmitted straight into Xie Qingcheng's chest, but the doctor didn't ask him anything. He waited for a long time. But Xie Qingcheng still didn't ask anything at all. The only words he said to him were the same as Chen Man's. "Can I help you with something?" The cool, subtle fragrance of white plum blossoms wafted over them. Finally, He Yu smiled faintly and said, in a voice full of both arrogance and resignation, "It's fine. It's nothing." He threw off Xie Qingcheng's hand and plucked a cold plum blossom off his epaulette. "I just saw a flower fall onto your shoulder." Then he turned and walked away, still holding the plum blossom between his fingers. As though he'd forgotten to throw it away, he ended up slipping it into his pocket. The shoot for this large ensemble scene was very long. He Yu had shown up unexpectedly, but when the creative director caught sight of him, he immediately arranged for him to sit down in the tent. Thanks to his flare-up, He Yu was feeling very bloodthirsty. Making him sit in a crowd right now would be like throwing a vampire into a group of living people. So he automatically refused the offer. I thought he was supposed to be the director's assistant anyway, so I would have thought that he needs to be at pretty much every shoot doing something. But anyway, speaking of vampires, I've said this before, I will say it again, but there's a few types of novels that I need Meat Bun to write. She needs to write an Omega-verse novel, obviously. And she needs to write a vampire novel. I need that from her. Henry, oh, but he's rich. You're right, like, it's just a title. He doesn't really have to do anything. He wouldn't be able to see Xie Qingcheng in the crowd during the shoot anyway. So after giving it some thought, he decided to leave and head over to the set in the same police academy where Group A was filming a fight scene featuring explosives. This proved to be the right choice. Although Group A's shoot today didn't feature many people or use an extensive set, the contents of the scene were extremely bloody and thrilling. The protagonists had been cut off by their pursuers and surrounded. Guns were fired and blades were drawn, and blood splattered everywhere. There were even several extreme close-up shots where the cameraman had moved in too far and the fake blood splashed directly onto the camera lens, modeling the brutal tableau like a blood-soaked starry sky. Looking at these scenes was like a sedative for He-yu. With his symptoms alleviated somewhat, when the director yelled cut and the cameras returned to their original positions, he simply rose and headed over to the set for a walk. Even though the bright red staining the ground was fake, just looking at it soothed his heart. As he idly strolled through the set, He-yu inadvertently caught sight of an extra, a woman whose hair had gone mostly white. She wore a floral cotton quilted jacket and played a member of the crowd who was trying to flee during the chaos. When He-yu's gaze fell on her, he lingered briefly on her face. For some reason, this woman seemed somewhat familiar. Henry, can we try fake blood as a placebo? Did Meat Bun just confirm that, like, right after you said it? Oh my god. Apparently, we can try fake blood as a placebo. That's so funny. That's gonna be part of the treatment. But there were plenty of people in the world who looked similar to each other, so He-yu didn't pay it much mind and calmly looked away. But a few seconds later, He-yu abruptly froze. A memory suddenly surfaced in his mind, polished to a bright shine. He immediately turned back and stared closely at that woman's face. There was no mistaking it. A long time had passed. She seemed older and more desperate, with wrinkles corroding her face and muddling her features, but He-yu still recognized her. He had watched the broadcasting tower's video of Xie Qingcheng on repeat so many times. Of course he recognized her. Of all people, this woman was the patient who had gotten into a heated dispute with Xie Qingcheng in that video. It's so funny that this film project has just brought everyone together. Like, what are the chances? And what are the chances of that? And that immediately makes me suspicious of this woman's role in things. Like, was she somehow, I don't know, planted to elicit a certain response out of Xie Qingcheng? I don't know. That, like, it's anything is possible. I'm just, like, what is she doing here? Most extras spent their breaks listlessly lying around. This woman was no different. She didn't have much of an education, but she enjoyed acting, so after she'd escaped her unhappy marriage and left her hometown nearly 3 decades ago, she had never returned. Back when she'd just arrived in the city, she had still been full of passion, hoping to one day achieve fame and become a household name. However, not everyone was destined to become a leading actor, and she had spent her entire life as a bit player. Her only moment in the limelight had been in the aftermath of the broadcasting tower incident, when the viral video featuring her quarrel with that doctor had spread wildly across the internet. She couldn't read and didn't really browse the web, as someone who grew up in the countryside, she still carried an air of rustic simplicity. So she wasn't so insane as to try to use that video to develop a following. However, she was still eager to share with those around her, telling them, "Have you seen that video? The person arguing with the doctor was me." If someone asked her for more details, she would explain in her thick rural accent. Back then, I was very scared, but... She had a heavy accent and her storytelling was very disorganized. So when people heard her opening words, a lot of them would be reluctant to listen to the rest. More often than not, even those who listened to her story through to the end had trouble making sense of what she was trying to say. Before long, people's initial curiosity turned to indifference. Recently, the other bit players that she knew had all taken to calling her Auntie Xianglin. There's a footnote. A character from Lu Xun's short story, The New Year's Sacrifice, who often repeats the story of her own life. They often teased her. "Auntie Xianglin, what happened back then? What did you go see the doctor for?" It's not that simple. At first, she had anxiously tried to explain herself. But eventually she came to realize that no one believed her, and that they were all just making fun of her. So she would only smile, the wrinkles on her face filling with an awkward flush as she stammered to a halt. She really is like Auntie Xianglin when she gets embarrassed, people would muse. She knew very well that things could get very tiring on a production set with all these repeated takes. So she was currently sitting in a shady spot in the hallway, taking advantage of the time it took for the cameras to return to their positions. Never mind whether the floor was dirty or not. It was much more important to conserve her energy. Suddenly, to her surprise, someone addressed her with a quiet, "Hello." Startled, she looked back to see He Yu's face. From his face alone, she could see that he belonged to a completely different class in the hierarchy of this production. Years of struggling to get by had caused her to develop a pitiable instinct. As her sense of self-esteem had grown numb, her conditioned reaction to seeing people of influence had led her to hastily rise in a panicked fluster and apologize profusely. "I'm so sorry. I'll leave right away." She thought that she had blocked his path, or that the place where she was lying had somehow interrupted a shot. But He Yu asked her to stop. "Please wait." Even more alarmed, the woman stared anxiously up at him, until he said, "If I may, are you the patient who was humiliated by Dr. Xie in that video from the broadcasting tower incident?" She paused for a moment. "Are you?" She stared at him blankly for a long time before she recovered her senses. "I am. And you are?" After a few beats of silence, He Yu smiled. "There's a cafe just outside the police academy. Could I buy you a cup of coffee? I'd like to ask you a few questions." Ooh. Interesting. This is not who I thought that He Yu was going to see. And it has not escaped me that there's also a murderer hiding in the shadows somewhere. And He Yu has just left with this woman. So I don't know if something is going to happen while he's gone or what, but I'm concerned. They had missed the morning rush, and it was very quiet inside the cafe. He Yu picked a table in the farthest corner. The server who came to take their order looked at the odd-looking pair with an air of bewilderment. We get the lowdown. Nina, I don't know why I looked up and thought you said we got the lockdown. And I was like, what lockdown? We are getting the lowdown. I really hope we are getting the honest lowdown. The server who came to take their order looked at the odd-looking pair with an air of bewilderment. An unkempt old lady with a humble but frightened face, and an immaculately dressed, handsome young man. They didn't seem to be a mother with her son, but they didn't look like a wealthy lady and her gigolo either. Those are the two options that come to mind. "Are the two of you together?" the server asked hesitantly. The awkwardness made the old woman's wrinkles deepen even further. Combined with the flush on her face, She looked like a dried-out, purple-skinned walnut. He Yu cast the server a coldly indifferent glance. Yes, 2 cups of coffee, please. The domineering aura of He Yu's gaze was much too powerful. Immediately cowed, the server didn't dare look at them or ask any further questions, and he carried 2 piping hot cups of coffee over in no time at all. By this point, the woman had gotten He Yu to explain why he'd approached her. I can't say much, she said anxiously. I promised that doctor. That's fine. He Yu handed her the sugar bowl and smiled gently. I'll listen to everything you have to say, however much you want to say, or however much you're able to. My brain is immediately going, that's weird, because what do you mean, I promised that doctor, ... What? Why would she have promised the doctor to not say something? The woman licked her lips as though desperately thirsty. She bowed her head, thinking for a long while. Recently, she had been going on about that video to anyone and everyone she met, but she had never actually said anything that she was supposed to keep secret. She had no. She had no idea why that doctor had asked her to act the way she did. But she'd accepted his money, so she ought to follow his requests and do her job accordingly. I didn't think we were gonna get it, like, right now. I thought it was gonna be like, you know, Meat Bun leaving that little tidbit to sit with us for a while. What? Oh, God. Okay. I need to calm down. Henry, you had to stay quiet about this since we got to the video. Oh, my God. What in the world? Okay. Where the heck was I? She might not have been the sharpest tool in the box, but she could tell that the youth sitting before her was different from the bit part actors she was used to. He wasn't here to listen to a funny story in passing. He genuinely cared about what had happened. Therefore, she didn't even know where to begin. She nervously picked up her coffee and took a sip, only to find that it was too bitter, nearly choking it back up. Auntie, here, use this to wipe it up. He Yu handed her a napkin. Even the woman's ears had gone red. I'm sorry. No, it's my fault for being inconsiderate. You don't like coffee, do you? He Yu called the server back over and exchanged her coffee for a cup of hot tea. The whole time, he never tried to rush her, so he slowly began to relax just a bit. She thought things over carefully. Faced with someone who genuinely wanted to listen, she felt unexpectedly hesitant. To be honest, I can't tell you anything. I don't know what exactly he was trying to do, either, but he asked me to keep it a secret. See, what I'm hoping is that that information in and of itself is enough to make He Yu go, wait a minute, why would Xie Qingcheng ask her to keep this a secret? I don't know. It's our, well, unless he was, I don't know. I'm just hoping that something clicks in He Yu's head about this, because he's probably not going to get a whole download, but it should be suspicious enough that he questions, like, what actually happened. That's fine. In that case, why don't I ask you some questions? All you have to do is nod or shake your head. If you can't do either of those things, then just treat this as me buying you a drink. You don't have to take it that seriously. Is that okay? The woman rubbed her feet together anxiously under the table. It was exceptionally easy dealing with this kind of honest, simple woman. "Auntie," said Yu, "just now you said that that doctor asked you to keep it a secret, but in that video, the two of you were arguing. Can I take this to mean that your argument was faked?" "Thank you, Yu. Sometimes you're actually smart. About certain things. Not about yourself, but about other people." The woman froze. "According to some recent discussions online, the day you appeared outside his department, your behavior was very suspicious. Apparently, you registered for an appointment with the gynecology department, but you kept wandering around the psychiatry department, which aroused the suspicions of the doctor on call. He saw that not only did you have the wrong registration number, but that your number had already expired. Yet you still hadn't visited the gynecology department, and insisted on hanging around his office door. Therefore, he thought that you must have some mental health issues, and called the security guards to come take you away. And that's when the two of you had your altercation." Yu gazed at her through the steam rising from his coffee. "At the time, were you really mentally ill?" When all was said and done, the woman was an honest person, so she quickly waved her hand. "I wasn't. I'm not ill." "Then why did you go to the hospital and sit in front of his consulting room?" She didn't reply. "Were you plotting a medical disturbance?" There's a footnote. Medical disturbance, or Yi Now, refers to the widespread phenomenon of premeditated violence against medical personnel, usually on behalf of dissatisfied patients or their families. Okay, so hold on. So considering there's a literal Chinese term for this, and considering the thing that happened to Qin Xian, is this a thing that, like, commonly happens? Well, we're now learning that this whole thing was faked anyway, but I can really understand why Xie Qingcheng was concerned for himself. If this is just a thing that, like, just happens, you know, it's not just like a rare occurrence. Of course he knew that she wasn't, but the woman began to panic. She said, I've never done anything immoral. I might be poor, but I wouldn't cause trouble for doctors who are treating patients." Yu stared at her. "Auntie, you don't seem to resent him at all, even though he spoke to you so unreasonably back then and called security to take you away. But your reaction right now is that you can't say much because you need to keep a secret for him." She fell silent. "You're really not very good at lying," said Yu calmly. The woman's face turned even redder as she gazed at him in embarrassment. "You were an actress, so could I be so bold as to make a guess?" he asked. The woman didn't say anything, her head hanging low, as if she wanted to bury it in her chest. But even in this ostrich-like posture, she couldn't evade Yu's soft voice. "Would I be correct in guessing that Dr. Xie invited you to work with him towards some sort of goal? That he specifically had you wait outside his consulting room to act out a charade that the two of you had discussed beforehand? He didn't tell you anything about the goal he had in mind. He simply told you not to tell anyone the truth. You took the money, did as you were told, and then left according to his instructions. Many years later, when you had nearly forgotten about this event entirely, the video from the broadcasting tower murder case suddenly went viral, and you remembered this job that you took long ago. Auntie, is that what happened?" The woman's eyes were wide from shock. With every sentence Yu said, her eyes grew larger and larger, until they finally looked like they were on the verge of bulging out. How could you, how? She wanted to say, how could you understand everything so clearly? But she was so astonished that she couldn't finish her sentence. But Yu didn't need her to say anything else. His expression had turned very grim, and his eyes grew extremely dark. He'd already gotten the answer he was looking for from her face. That's the end of the chapter. Well, I'm going to take a break, and when we come back, we will be on chapter 83, which is called, Are You Sick Too? Addressing Xie Qingcheng, which is what I've been saying. There's no way that Xie Qingcheng is not also mentally ill. Like, he's got to have at least, like, PTSD or something. I forget if we discussed this in the last stream or if it was, like, in Discord. But, I think I was talking about that, and I was like, wouldn't that mean that He Yu can control him with his blood toxin? But, maybe... I forget who said this. Someone said, well, maybe... Wait. I don't even remember now if this was, like, publicly in the Discord or in a direct message. But the thought was that maybe there's a certain level of mentally ill that you need to be before He Yu can control you with the blood toxin. So who knows? But my thought is that He Yu should be able to control Xie Qingcheng as well, because that man has been suppressing everything his whole entire life, and he's definitely not mentally well. So interesting for the chapter title to be asking that question. So I am going to go take my break, and I will be back to find out what the heck is going on. I am back. I am so excited to see what the heck is going on. Henry, you agrees he should be able to control Xie Qingcheng. Yep, that's what he wishes. So, we are on page 345 for chapter 83. Are you sick too? When He Yu returned to Group B's film set, his heart was pounding and burning in his chest. He thought of what his cousin had said, and then of the expression the old woman had revealed. It was like Xie Qingcheng was wearing layer upon layer of clothes. Whenever he stripped off one shirt, there was always another one underneath. He was like an intangible fog, and after all this time, He Yu still couldn't touch him to tell whether his blood was hot or cold, whether his skin was icy or warm. The only thing that He Yu knew for sure was that Xie Qingcheng was still keeping secrets from him, from everyone. But why was he doing this? What else did He Yu not know? Group B was currently in the middle of a break. When he got back, He Yu saw Chen Man speaking to the director alone. There was no one else around him. He Yu looked away and frantically searched for any sign of Xie Qingcheng. Then he saw him, smoking next to the flower bed on the police academy's drill grounds. He Yu descended the steps, walked halfway across the field, and grabbed Xie Qingcheng's arm as he approached him. "Come with me." Xie Qingcheng snapped out of his daze. Rage flashed in his eyes for a split second when he saw it was He Yu, but he quickly suppressed it, as if he thought that being angry with someone like He Yu was a waste of energy. "What is it you want? Are you trying to haunt me like some kind of ghost?" He Yu didn't respond as he dragged him into an empty classroom in a nearby teaching building. He pushed Xie Qingcheng in first before he followed, slamming the door shut behind them. He didn't turn around. He kept his eyes fixed on Xie Qingcheng, but he reached behind his back and locked the door with a clack. Xie Qingcheng stood before him, wearing the formal winter police uniform. He looked extremely dashing and upright, just tempting someone to rip off his uniform and kiss him. He Yu had always been very smart, But the CPU of that smart brain of his was about to collapse under the weight of his complicated feelings for Xie Qingcheng. With everyone else, whether it was his cousin or the woman from the video, he handled them with skillful ease and an almost relaxed air. It was only when faced with Xie Qingcheng that he felt like he'd been electrocuted. His thought process was completely numb. Those cold eyes bored into him. He Yu, you're still not done? Originally, He Yu had planned to immediately ask him about the matter with the old woman. But now that he'd locked the door, now that he was breathing in Xie Qingcheng's scent, it was as if he had suddenly been struck in the head. His bloodthirsty desire surged, along with his youthful urges. As He Yu looked at this man who was hiding too much, the restless hatred in his heart swelled forth in a deluge. He almost didn't have the time to interrogate him. In the single moment that he gazed at him with his eyes rimmed red, he wanted to curse him out, wanted to tear him apart, wanted to cut him open and dissect him. There were so many crazy emotions washing through him that he felt like he was about to burst. He found himself unexpectedly unable to speak, with no choice but to seek immediate release. He Yu took 2 steps forward, moving for the first time since he'd found himself alone with Xie Qingcheng. Wrapping a hand around the back of Xie Qingcheng's head, he shoved the man's entire body against the lectern, turned his head to one side, and vengefully bit into his neck. Xie Qingcheng let out a low, muffled grunt at the unexpected pain. The soft sound sent sparks flying up He Yu's spine as the sweet, coppery taste of blood rushed into his mouth. Like I said, can we write a vampire novel? Meat bun. The dragon sucked at the blood of his sacrifice. It was hot and sweet, so much more stimulating than the fake blood that had splattered onto the camera lens. Sharp teeth bit into the human's neck and refused to let go. Wave after wave of warmth gushed out of Xie Qingcheng's broken skin. He Yu couldn't help but let out a low sigh of satisfaction as he swallowed the warm blood, his Adam's apple bobbing. Basically is a vampire novel already. Just like that, the restless emotion that had been driving him to the edge of madness mere moments ago was put to rest through this bloody encounter. The unending fever from his condition was making He Yu's entire body burn up, and when he pressed himself against Xie Qingcheng, it felt as though he could sear the older man's flesh and blood through their clothes. Xie Qingcheng wanted to break free, but He Yu wouldn't relinquish his grip. Instead, he pushed the man in the neatly pressed uniform against the lectern, knocking down some police academy teaching materials and promotional brochures in the process. Get off, He Yu. I'm telling you to get off me. Let go. He Yu found his mouth way too annoying, so he lifted his thin, blood-stained lips from Xie Qingcheng's neck to press an almost savage kiss to his lips, sealing away that cold, mood-spoiling voice of his. He Yu entangled with him desperately. He'd never realized that kissing could be such a pleasurable activity, that it could soothe the ordinary animal desires of youth and calm psychological Ebola's bloodlust at the same time. Xie Qingcheng could see that speaking to him properly was no use, so he bit him back viciously instead. This kiss was far more brutal and blood-soaked than any they'd shared before. Perhaps Xie Qingcheng had really angered He Yu this time. Or perhaps He Yu had truly stopped caring, as Xie Qingcheng had never bitten him this hard before, but He Yu still refused to back off. Either way, in the end, it was Xie Qingcheng who came off worse. With his lack of libido, he had never experienced such a searing, frenzied kiss before. It was the first time such a large amount of He Yu's blood had filled his mouth, spilling deeply into his throat, The heavy taste, so unbearable it made him want to choke. He began to gasp for air. It was only then that He let him go. His bright red lips were wet, smeared with both Xie Qingchung's blood and his own. They had each gotten a thorough taste of the other's blood. I really want to fucking kill you. Just like this, He said as he bore down on Xie Qingchung's body. His hands clamped around Xie Qingchung's wrists, prohibiting any movement. But finally, he straightened up slightly, pulling away just a fraction so that he could take a clearer look at Xie Qingchung in his disheveled uniform. Seriously, he said with extreme hatred, resentment, and agitation. That's exactly what I want to do right now. Because that might be the only way to get a word of truth out of your lying mouth. Am I right? Okay. It's time to look at the art, which I was taking a second to comprehend. But yeah, we've got demon horns and dragon wings on He. Yep. At first, I turned the page and I thought that, like, something had fallen on top of them, but I'm like, no, those are wings. So, Henry, leave the lectern out of this. Xie Qingchung could finally breathe. His chest heaved fiercely as he gasped. His navy blue jacket had been torn open as they tangled, revealing the light blue police uniform dress shirt underneath. He wanted to unfasten the uniform's silver belt buckle, so one of the hands he was pinning Xie Qingchung with went slack. How could Xie Qingchung possibly allow He to run rampant like this? The moment He loosened his grip, he immediately turned the tables with a burst of strength, slamming He fiercely against the desk, before slapping him in the face with full force. You fucking animal. A red mark appeared on his cheek immediately. But He only felt pleasure, not pain. He was abnormal to begin with, and his illness only served to intensify his brutal nature. Such a violent release of emotion only brought him mental and physical delight. Curse me out some more, he said. Xie Qingchung grabbed him by the hair and yanked him up, shoving him into the blackboard before kicking him ruthlessly and knocking him to the ground. Tables and chairs toppled over behind him with a resounding crash. I called you an animal. Panting, he tugged his navy blue necktie with its silver clasp straight before refastening the buttons of his jacket one by one. His bloodshot eyes sharp as a blade and piercing as an awl as he stared at He. He didn't get up. He slowly wiped at the blood smearing the corner of his mouth and cheek, and only straightened up slightly. It was as though the mess of tables and chairs behind him had become his throne. He leaned against the mass of upended furniture, just like that, and lifted those unfathomable almond eyes to carefully look Xie Qingchung up and down with a coldly sinister air. Then, pressing his tongue to the back of his teeth, he laughed. He tilted his head back and laughed for a long, long time. The scent of blood saturated every breath he took. Yet he felt an indescribable pleasure, a pleasure that stemmed from his pathology being satisfied. You know that I'm in the middle of a flare-up, right, Xie Qingchung? Xie Qingchung looked at him in silence. The sicker I become, the less I care what you do. Even if you stabbed me through the heart with a knife right now, I just feel happy. Incredibly happy. Because it wouldn't hurt. But you'd owe me for the rest of your life. You'd never be able to act innocent and pure ever again. He panted, his eyes ruthlessly predatory as he bored into that man. You really are too good at disguising yourself, Xie Qingchung. Xie Qingchung still didn't reply. You are wreathed in layer upon layer of disguises, like a cocoon within a cocoon. Let me ask you, which of those layers is actually real? What are you talking about? Said Xie Qingchung. Did you take the wrong fucking medicine today? Oh, you only laughed. a sound so terrifying it could make one's blood run cold. When he finally stopped laughing, he reached out to Xie Qingcheng. "Come here." For some reason, the moment he said those words, Xie Qingcheng, who had just imbibed a considerable amount of He Yu's blood, abruptly paled. His brow creased as if he was suddenly deeply uncomfortable, and his face took on a kind of sickly pallor. Hold on. I have a thought, but I'm gonna wait. But He Yu didn't notice. "Come here," he repeated. "I want you to listen to something. Xie Qingcheng, I'm telling you, there's nothing in this world that can stay hidden forever. Listen to this carefully, and you'll understand why I came to find you today." Xie Qingcheng stood in place for a while, his face still pale, before finally, slowly walking over to He Yu. He Yu took out his cell phone and pulled up a recording. Before pressing play, however, he looked into Xie Qingcheng's pitch-black eyes. "Do you know who I ran into today?" No reply. "Would you like to take a guess?" "If there's something that you want to say, He Yu, then just say it." He Yu smiled coldly. "Here's hoping you'll be able to maintain your composure once you finish listening. And here's hoping that when you hear this person's voice, you'll be able to remember the chance encounter you once shared." The corners of his mouth curved into a mocking smile, and he spoke his next words with deliberate emphasis, or rather, the farce you once enacted. Click. The recording began to play. It was the entirety of the conversation between He Yu and the old woman at the cafe. The audio wasn't very long. In fact, the entire recording didn't last as long as Xie Qingcheng's silence after it finished playing. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. In the end, He Yu asked slowly, "What do you think? Did you like it?" "Where did you meet her?" Xie Qingcheng asked. "In this very production." He Yu slowly set his phone down. "So you're not planning on denying it?" Xie Qingcheng said nothing. "Why did you two act out a scene like that? Xie Qingcheng, what exactly were you trying to do? What are you hiding?" Xie Qingcheng was silent for a moment longer. Then he closed his eyes. It was a personal matter. He Yu leaned his head back, wiping away the last of the blood staining the corners of his lips. Then his eyes landed back on Xie Qingcheng's figure. Provoked, he let out a cold, sneering laugh. Personal. He stared at him with his black eyes, no longer interested in wasting his breath on arguing about what constituted personal versus public. "Honestly, I'm well within my rights to ask you a few things about your personal matters." His eyes flickered slightly. "You already belong to me. So why shouldn't your business be mine?" Being spoken to like this was the one thing Xie Qingcheng couldn't stand. He Yu was treating him like a woman. He opened his eyes and his expression swiftly darkened, becoming even more unsightly than it had been moments before. "I wish you had some sense of shame, He Yu." "And I wish you'd tell the truth, Xie Qingcheng." The words that left He Yu's blood-stained lips sounded vaguely like a command. For some reason, upon hearing those words, Xie Qingcheng's body swayed faintly, and his face abruptly blanched. This time, very unfortunately, He Yu noticed. He didn't pay it any mind at first, but a beat later, as though he'd suddenly realized something, he started in surprise. He narrowed his eyes, staring at Xie Qingcheng and his sudden onset of discomfort. "Xie Qingcheng," He Yu asked, "what's wrong?" "I." Xie Qingcheng's response was instantaneous, almost like he couldn't help but answer. But before he could finish speaking, he seemed to forcibly rein it in. His chest rose and fell as though he was trying to endure something, his expression clearly shifting as he gritted his teeth. Then he abruptly turned his face away. Huyu's expression turned even more unsightly as his voice hardened, determined to get to the bottom of this. "Speak. What's wrong?" He didn't answer. The sickly paleness of Xie Qingcheng's complexion became even more evident. Frozen in place, his back trembled slightly. It seemed like he did want to say something, but he was keeping himself firmly under control. After a long stretch of silence, Xie Qingcheng suddenly erupted in a series of harsh coughs. His coughing fit was so violent it made him list backward. Leaning against the icy ceramic tiles of the classroom wall, he looked up at Huyu through reddened eyes in what seemed to be genuine misery. At that moment, seeing his unusual reaction, Huyu's heart shuddered violently. Could it be? "Xie Qingcheng, you're..." He didn't finish his sentence right away. The way Xie Qingcheng looked right now suddenly called to mind something he'd experienced before, on a winter day several years ago. Back when he'd been studying overseas, he'd gone to a health facility and run into a mentally ill patient with severe symptoms. The doctors and nurses had tried to persuade him with words, but it was futile. They'd had no choice but to forcibly restrain and sedate him. But that foreign patient was very strong and struggled free in an instant, shouting and cursing in French at the top of his lungs as he swung at the staff. "I'm going to kill you all. Who told you to lock me up? Who let you treat me like this?" Huyu hadn't been feeling very well himself. That day, he'd sustained a minor injury that was still bleeding. So bloodthirsty violence was already on his mind. If he wanted to calm himself down as quickly as possible, watching a scene as hectic and intense as that obviously wouldn't do him any good. He was too annoyed to keep quiet, so he said reproachfully in French, "Shut up." Those words had been nothing more than a slip of the tongue as Huyu was passing by, but for some reason, this lunatic's face suddenly turned pale. He stared at Huyu as if he'd seen something terrifying. The patient's suffering still seemed to be surging through his body, about to condense into a shriek and burst forth from his mouth. But as he stared attentively at Huyu, he actually managed to use all his strength to choke back the cries in his throat. In the wake of Huyu's "shut up," it was as though a massive, invisible hand had locked itself around his neck. Back then, all the medical personnel present had been dumbfounded. Do you know him?" "I do not," Huyu replied, just as taken aback. For the doctors and nurses, the event passed just like that. Later on, they assumed that it was likely just a coincidence. Only Huyu realized that it wasn't. He had looked carefully at the patient's deathly pale face, at the veins that bulged as he strained, and a tentative idea suddenly rose up in his heart, diffusing improbably through the air like early morning fog. After the medical personnel left, he walked over to where the patient was still gasping for breath. Huyu shot a sidelong look at the seated man. To confirm his suspicions, he issued him the cruelest possible order. Testing the waters, he said softly, "This is in French." I cannot read French. But I think I know what he's saying. Je veux que tu te suicides. I think he's asking him to commit suicide. Which is a kind of interesting because I didn't think that... Well, okay. It did say... I believe it said that Yu... Okay, no, he hadn't been feeling very well himself. Bloodthirsty violence was already on his mind. So I guess it kind of makes sense. I was kind of thinking, like, would Yu tell another mentally ill person to do something like that when he has sort of, like, an empathy for other mentally ill people? But I'm still processing what we have just seemingly confirmed that I was literally, like, just theorizing about. Okay. This stream has been crazy. I need to calm down. And then, like a horrifying truth breaking through the dense fog, suddenly, the patient's conscious mind began to resist, making his face turn bloodless with pain as his body swayed back and forth. Like a pair of distant mirrors, Yu's eyes reflected his struggle. He stood very close to the patient, close enough that the man could smell the stench of blood on his body. After a few seconds, or perhaps a few dozen, the man lifted his hand, as if finally overpowered by the nebulous force that was tearing him apart. Eyes unfocused, he raised his hand, and ruthlessly seized his own neck. Yu was so astonished that it wasn't until the man had nearly choked himself to death that he snapped out of it. He immediately called out to him, "Stop! Stop it!" The man dropped his hand as if exhausted. His tall, sturdy physique looked as if it had come out of a red-hot forge, and he collapsed onto the ground like a heap of mud. Afterward, Yu found out that if he could make a mentally ill person smell his blood and then gave them a command, they would lose control of themselves and carry out his orders. At Chung Kong Psychiatric Hospital, he'd learned from Xie Qingcheng that this ability had a name: blood toxin. In the present, Yu's gaze was fixed unwaveringly on Xie Qingcheng's face. This expression, the face of someone being compelled by the blood toxin, but using all his strength to shake off those invisible chains. He knew it all too well. There was no mistake. Right now, Xie Qingcheng was being affected by his blood toxin in the exact same way. What was I just saying? I didn't think that I had the ability to, like, predict things that were happening in this book, because it's really taken us for a ride. It's been so ridiculous so far that I just assumed I was not going to be right about anything. Henry, did you know this? Also, what did you say? Add Dom sub first to the list of things Meat Bun wants to be writing. Mm-hmm. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. It was as if a sharp blade had cut through the fog and darkness. A subtle flicker of light flashed through Yu's eyes. Slowly rising from the floor, he murmured, "Xie Qingcheng, you..." Xie Qingcheng had always been extremely calm. Yu knew very well that it was easy for him to resolutely weather situations as absurd as the one that had just transpired. But at that moment, he didn't dare meet Yu's eyes. Instead, he suddenly turned around and strode toward the door with an ashen expression on his face. Xie Qingcheng's hand had already grabbed the doorknob and unlocked it with a click. He was about to pull the door open and leave. But at that moment, Yu caught up to him from behind and shut the classroom door again with a bang. Pressing one hand against the door next to Xie Qingcheng's face, and wordlessly grabbing the man's waist with his other, he forced him to turn around and face him. He wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong. Yu's pupils contracted. There was no way he was wrong. Xie Qingcheng was such a profoundly cold person. But at this moment, his body was shuddering violently in his grip, as if, despite losing control of himself in the face of Yu's command, he refused to rein himself to his fate, and was struggling with all his might, like a butterfly caught in a spider's web. He was desperate to escape the compulsion of the blood toxin. For a while, He Yu didn't know what to say. Astonishment, fury, amazement, excitement, ecstasy, grief. In that moment, all of these emotions, as incompatible as fire and water, flooded into his heart. He Yu looked at the man trapped between his chest and the classroom door. This man who never had a hair out of place, who was always strong and severe. He simply didn't dare believe it. His voice came out mangled. "Are you the same as me?" Xie Qingcheng said nothing. "Xie Qingcheng, could it be you're the same as me?" Each syllable was more vicious, more sorrowful, more crazed, and more despairing than the last. "Are you?" His despair stemmed from his disbelief that Xie Qingcheng could also have psychological problems. In his eyes, Xie Qingcheng had always been an extremely strong person, someone who was endlessly capable of controlling his own emotions and state of mind. Not to mention, he was a doctor. If even this kind of person could secretly buckle under the pressures of society and suffer from a mental illness, then how could He Yu believe that the human heart could prevail over such illnesses? These demons could even defeat someone like Xie Qingcheng. Panting, He Yu yanked on Xie Qingcheng's hair, forcing Xie Qingcheng to look at him. Almond eyes, filled with a trembling halo of light, met a pair of peach blossom eyes that were as still as stagnant water. They were practically nose to nose. Xie Qingcheng had inhaled more of the scent of He Yu's blood than anyone who had been affected by blood toxin before, so its effect on him was correspondingly much stronger. Which just goes to show the fact that he could hold off against it at all means that he has, like, Xie Qingcheng has suppressed himself so successfully. He Yu's throat bobbed as he watched him, unable to stop himself from stroking Xie Qingcheng's hair over and over again in a deranged way. He strove for calm, lowering his volume, but still, his voice was shaking. The emotions hidden within were even more terrifying than his voice itself. His blood-stained lips hovered just above Xie Qingcheng's slightly panting mouth, with only a few centimeters between them. He mumbled, or said, or ordered, "Tell me." He Yu clutched at Xie Qingcheng so hard that, when the older man removed his police uniform later today, he'd doubtless find his waist covered in blue and purple bruises. He Yu gripped him firmly, like he had managed to grasp onto a vein of truth in the slipping, sliding quicksand. An intense light flashed through his eyes, but his voice grew softer and softer, like a shaman's murmured incantation. "Tell me, are you the same as me?" Xie Qingcheng's brow creased in pain. "Tell the truth, Xie Qingcheng." He Yu was desperate to uncover the secrets hidden within this man's body. His heart pounded, heating him up until his eyes burned scarlet. "Are you mentally ill too?" That's the end of the chapter. We have one more chapter to go today, I believe. Yes. Seriously though, because didn't Henry, you said if this happens from sniffing it, what happens if he drinks it? And I thought it said that Xie Qingcheng, like, accidentally drank some of He Yu's blood. So imagine how hard this is to resist right now, and he's, like, still kind of resisting it. So, we are on page 361 for chapter 84. Are you unwilling to tell the truth? A sudden harshness edged into He Yu's voice. "Say something." No response. Under his repeated interrogation, Xie Qingcheng paled beneath him and slowly closed his eyes. A man's man, like Xie Qingcheng, would otherwise never feel the slightest fear of He Yu. But the power of the blood toxin was brutal, overbearing, coursing through his body unrestrained. This was different from the way it had been before. He'd never tasted all that much of it, but this time he'd ingested so much of He Yu's blood. His mouth was still filled with the metallic taste He Yu had left behind from their passionate kiss. No matter how strong his willpower was, his body still felt an uncontrollable fear. In the face of this extremely invasive blood toxin, in spite of himself, he began to tremble. Xie Qingcheng. Xie Qingcheng's waist shivered in He Yu's grip. He even seemed somewhat pitiful, held like that. This was something He Yu had never felt before. He Yu looked down at the man's face, from his lowered lashes to his pale and slightly cool lips. But no matter how pitiful his body seemed, he still exuded an aura of strength. Xie Qingcheng could actually still resist. His forehead was quickly sheened with sweat. Against the navy blue of the formal police uniform he wore, his face seemed extraordinarily pale. In the end, it seemed as if he had pushed through via sheer willpower. It looked like even blood toxin had its limitations. After the strongest surge of compulsion passed, its coercive power gradually faded. Xie Qingcheng slowly stopped trembling. He was already soaked in sweat. He lifted his quivering lashes and whispered, "He Yu." Though his voice was very weak and extremely hoarse, he still sounded lucid. "Didn't you know? Everyone living in modern society is mentally ill to some degree." I think he's bluffing. He Yu stared at him. "The reason your blood toxin could affect me is because I didn't just smell your blood, I also drank it," he said very slowly, as if he lacked the strength to speak. "Even if I have only the mildest of mental issues, your ability still affects me if I swallow your blood. There's nothing strange about it." At this point, he reached out and slowly tried to push He Yu away. But He Yu didn't move. "You're still lying to me." Xie Qingcheng said nothing. "I bet half the things you've ever told me are lies. I know you're still lying this time. Why do you have to be such a liar? Xie Qingcheng? Everything you've told me, everything you've told anyone, is any of it true?" Xie Qingcheng didn't answer. Even though he'd escaped the overbearing power of the blood toxin, the residual terror of having his mind coerced and controlled remained within his blood. It made his head feel a little dizzy and his body a little weak. Leaning against the door, he took a moment to collect himself before straightening up and expressionlessly flinging He Yu's hand away without another word, determined to walk out. But he'd accidentally poured oil on the flames raging in He Yu's already frustrated mind. He Yu grabbed Xie Qingcheng by the hips and yanked him back. With a thud, he pinned him hard against the wall. "Don't even think about leaving this room without telling me the truth." Xie Qingcheng's current state was like that of someone who had just gone through a life-or-death struggle. His eyes were somewhat blank, unable to focus as they gazed at He Yu vacantly, but his tone was still harsh. "Let go." The response he received was He Yu clamping his wrists together and bringing them over his head, where he pinned them against the door. He stared down at him. And then, He Yu suddenly dipped his head to kiss him. He kissed him very hard. Since Xie Qingcheng no longer had much strength to fight back, He Yu licked his way in quickly, twisting his tongue inside Xie Qingcheng's slick, soft mouth as he tried to force him to taste more of his blood. It was an utterly unbridled kiss, and because there was less resistance, he actually felt a sense of bone-deep intimacy. By the time He let up a little and pulled his mouth away from the lips that he'd kissed to the point of wetness, both their breaths had quickened slightly. But while this was urgency born of desire on Yu's part, Xie Qingcheng's response was purely physiological due to a lack of oxygen. Listen up, Xie Qingcheng. If you don't tell me the truth, I'll use the blood toxin on you again. Yu pressed his blood-stained lips softly to Xie Qingcheng's mouth, his lower jaw, then moved up once more, nudging against the high bridge of his nose. I'll use it until you tell me. The answer will be the same, no matter how many times you use it, Xie Qingcheng said. If I can break free of it once, then I can do it again. Try it, if you don't believe me. Henry, he's the only one you can't control by charm or force, and he's the only one you cares to control. Oh, meat bun. Oh, meat bun indeed. Yu stared at him with overwhelming hatred. He wanted to kill Xie Qingcheng and dig all his hidden secrets from his cold, frigid corpse. But he couldn't handle seeing Xie Qingcheng in this weakened state, a sight he saw so rarely. Perhaps Xie Qingcheng possessed a toxin as well. Some toxin related to desire. Why else would Yu feel such a strong urge to hold him and kiss him when he saw him shivering and trembling with helpless vulnerability? When he didn't like men, he'd never liked men. Yu, who didn't like men, stared at Xie Qingcheng, who refused to obey. The young man's throat bobbed again as he took those lips, already rouged with his kisses, against his own once more. Either your body or your mouth is going to tell the truth. You can choose which one. The way I see it, it seems like you prefer the first option. Their lips intertwined wetly, and as Yu kissed him, the taste changed to that of desire burning hotter and hotter. Xie Qingcheng didn't want to bite Yu's tongue again, so Yu took the opportunity to intensify the kiss and press in deeper. The kiss grew fiercely heated as their tongues entwined, and soft, wet noises permeated the room. Xie Qingcheng was about to drive him insane. The answers he wanted to hear. The blood he wanted to drink. The body he wanted to fuck. They all belonged to one person, the person he held beneath him, in his arms. But he was so stubborn and impenetrable that Yu found himself driven close to madness with all kinds of complicated emotions. His mind and body manipulated by Xie Qingcheng's every move. Just who was controlling who here? Toward the end, the kiss transformed. The young man's desires were ready to burst out of him, and with Xie Qingcheng refusing to tell him the truth, Yu was unwilling to let him go just like that. He had to gain something from Xie Qingcheng to stave off the emptiness in his heart. His ministrations intensified, one hand wandering freely, while the other cradled the back of Xie Qingcheng's neck, angling his head as he kissed him again and again. He was positive that Xie Qingcheng and Li Ruoqiu had never shared such a heated kiss before. It was obvious that Xie Qingcheng wasn't used to it. Xie Qingcheng clearly wasn't someone who would take the initiative to kiss someone else. I'm going to hold on to that line. I'm holding on to that line for the moment when Xie Qingcheng is the first one to kiss him. Because I know that's going to happen. Xie Qingcheng clearly wasn't someone who would take the initiative to kiss someone else, and it was unlikely that a woman like Li Ruoqiu would aggressively take the lead with a man like this. It was impossible that they had ever entangled this way. Yu went to strip Xie Qingcheng of his clothing as he kissed him. It had been a long time since he'd slept with Xie Qingcheng. Well, to him, it had been a long time. With how provoked he felt by these secrets and emotions, He Yu's desire to touch Xie Qingcheng grew even stronger. He was panting slightly from how long they'd kissed, so he pulled back a little. Their lips were so wet that they made a soft smacking noise as they separated, a sound that made the rims of Xie Qingcheng's eyes redden. He Yu's eyes were even redder than Xie Qingcheng's, filled with desire, like an inescapable trawl that had yet to trap its prey, sweeping toward Xie Qingcheng to entangle him within its confines. If you refuse to be honest with me, then don't blame me for punishing you. As He Yu spoke, he tightened his grip, his movements bordering on violent, as he pressed his hand against the silver buckle of Xie Qingcheng's black leather uniform belt. The flames burning inside his chest were so hot that he was about to undo it immediately. But how could Xie Qingcheng let him? He seized the belt tightly and refused to let He Yu move it, his knuckles turning white as he tussled soundlessly with He Yu. As the pair struggled in silence, Xie Qingcheng could feel the youth's scalding hardness pressing into him where it rubbed against his stomach through their clothes, making the veins at Xie Qingcheng's temples bulge and throb until they ached. He resisted with all his might, as if being humiliated in a police uniform was something that he absolutely could not allow. He Yu wasn't quite able to gain the upper hand as they grappled with each other, simply because of the depth of Xie Qingcheng's fury. It was difficult to say whether the two of them were hooking up or fighting, as both ended up sustaining some considerable injuries. At that very moment, He Yu's phone rang. He Yu had no intention of answering. He continued to pull at Xie Qingcheng's uniform, turning his head to press kisses onto the man's pale neck. But the calls came in, one after another, unceasingly urgent, until finally, He Yu began to feel somewhat vexed. Henry, I don't get his ex-wife. Who wouldn't get on top of that man? That's just unscientific. Furious, he took out his cell phone with the intention of turning it off. When he looked down, however, he saw 6 missed calls from Executive Huang. The 7th was still ringing relentlessly. He Yu had no choice. Shooting Xie Qingcheng a ferocious glare through eyes that had been seared red. He took a moment to catch his breath and then tapped his phone to accept the call. Hello. Lu Jishu had arrived. Hoping to surprise her son, she hadn't given him a heads up. As Huang Jilong told him this over the phone, He Yu stared at where he had Xie Qingcheng shoved against the door, at his rumpled uniform and the sweat beading on his forehead, and couldn't help but gnash his teeth. Well, his mom had certainly given him a great fucking surprise. Hurry up and get over here. They mentioned that you're on set, so Executive Liu came over directly. She's waiting for you in the director's tent. Ugh, Mom. After he hung up, it took He Yu a long while to pull himself back together. There were several beats of silence. He Yu lifted his eyes and said to Xie Qingcheng, Officer Chen's leaving today, right? His red lips were wet as he braced one hand against the door and lifted the other to pat Xie Qingcheng on the face. Just wait. I'll come to your room tonight and finish what we started. Lu Jishu hadn't come alone. He Li was on winter break and had returned home from school. As neither He Jiwei nor Lu Jishu were spending the spring festival holiday in Yanzhou this year, instead choosing to remain in Huzhou. He was different from He Yu in that over the course of his entire life, he had never once been treated with cold neglect. He'd cried and thrown a great tantrum over the phone, but in the end, unable to persuade his parents, he could only follow them down to Huzhou, sobbing and sniffling the whole while. He Yu was still burning with rage over Xie Qingcheng's behavior, so when he suddenly came face to face with the little brother he hadn't seen in ages, His eyes couldn't help but abruptly cool by several degrees. He was in middle school, and far inferior to He in terms of looks. However, his general facial features still carried a shadow of the He family's genes, so he could still be considered fortunate on the whole. He, you're here. Liu Jishu and He Li were in the middle of watching something on the director's monitors. When she turned back and saw that He had entered, Liu Jishu hastily pasted on a freshly baked smile before pushing He Li forward. Go say hi to your big brother. He Li pouted. It made him look like a wretched tramp. No way, I don't wanna. Luckily, He Yu had drunk some of Xie Qingcheng's blood and released some of his pent-up emotions, so he wasn't feeling particularly violent. Otherwise, given his condition that morning, there was truly no guarantee that he wouldn't have beaten his little brother to death in front of all these witnesses. As it was, he could control himself now, so he smiled blandly, maintaining decorum. Long time no see, He Li. Just looking at him made He Li feel green with envy. People always looked different in photos and videos than they did in the flesh. He Yu was even better looking in person than he appeared in camera. He was stately and handsome with skin as white as snow, and for some reason his lips were more vividly red than normal, like plum blossoms in a snowy field. But he was tall in stature, and aside from his exquisitely refined face, his aura wasn't feminine in the least. In fact, he gave off an overwhelmingly domineering air. Forget the fact that He Li couldn't beat him in any subject in school. Even when it came to looks, he was inferior in multiple aspects. How could He Li be at peace with this, when the two of them had been born to the same parents? If it wasn't for how much more his parents had doted on him all these years, he probably would have ended up even more unhinged than He Yu. The only thing that pleased him was the knowledge that his brother was sick. He didn't know exactly what kind of illness it was, but he knew he was abnormal. Sometimes, when he was in a dark mood, he would even think, if He Yu died from his illness, then there'd be no competition for his family's inheritance once he got older. Children who grew up in households like theirs would often end up no better than those from the most destitute of families. Sons and daughters would cheat each other as a matter of course, and brothers would try to find ways to entrap and send one another to prison. None of that was out of the ordinary. I see he's been influenced by the way his parents are. Oh, or his friends. He Li had been deeply influenced by the pack of scoundrels he called friends in Yanzhou, so it was inevitable that he'd entertain such sinister ideas. No wonder Wei Donghong disliked He Yu so much. The older He Li became, the more clearly inferior he was to He Yu, and the more hostile he felt toward his elder brother. Is He Li friends with Wei Donghong? He's in middle school. Like, does that even make sense? Is that what we're saying here? This whole, everyone is so entangled. Like, everybody knows everybody, and it's a mess. He grew to understand just how unpleasant it must have been for young Master Wei to have spent his entire childhood being compared to He Yu by the people in their social circle. He would have much rather had Wei Donghong for a brother. Wei Donghong was trash in every way, a perfect contrast to He Li's own excellence. That would be much more agreeable. He Yu glanced down at the middle schooler from the corner of his eyes. He could tell what He Li was thinking with little to no effort, and he scoffed coldly and lifted a hand to pat He Li on the head. The gesture might have seemed affectionate, but the strength he used was considerable. You've gotten taller, he said. What are you doing? Why did you hit me? He jumped, backing away abruptly and turning to his mom to tattle with a bashful expression. "Mom, he hit me." However, to He's shock, his mother refused to come to his aid. Instead, she just coughed quietly. "Your brother hasn't seen you for a long time, so he got too excited." "What do you mean he hit you?" "Why would he hit you? He's your brother. Come on." Never mind how dumbstruck He was. Even Yu raised an eyebrow slightly, looking at Liu Jishu with a complicated expression on his face. Liu Jishu walked over and gave Yu a hug. "After I picked up Li, I made a special trip here to come see you. Tomorrow, I'll send someone to Huzhou to clean up the house." To have his family constantly by his side had once been a dream that Yu had yearned for day and night. But now that it was about to come true, he honestly didn't feel all that excited. He had probably waited so long he'd become numb to the idea. Too many things had happened since the days he'd held that dream. And people's hearts were prone to change. "Let's have dinner together tonight," Liu Jishu continued. Yu had finally managed to wait things out until Chenman had left, but now his mother and brother had shown up. He truly couldn't muster any enthusiasm. "All right," he said with an exceedingly indifferent expression, reluctant to even pretend to look happy. "Let's get dinner." The meal passed by in a tedious fashion. It was almost embarrassing. The dishes didn't even taste as good as the wontons Xie Qingcheng had made him. And the occasion came to a boring end. "Mom, I have work tomorrow, so I can't hang out with you guys. I'm going to go back to the hotel. I'm sorry." Yu's words, at least, were polite. Liu Jishu accepted the excuse readily. The three of them being able to finish a meal together peacefully was an achievement in itself, so she didn't force it. She watched Yu get into the van and leave without argument. As soon as he left, Li started sulking. "Mom, how come you're being so nice to him all of a sudden?" "I don't like it when you're nice to him. He's still your ge, and we didn't look after him enough before." Seeing Li's expression, Liu Jishu immediately added, "But you'll always be the one I love the most." Like, what terrible, how, I can't even word. That's, you can't pick favorites with your kids. It's far too late for that. I just, like, come on. I was reacting because I love how Meat Bun pulled in the wontons thing into this story as well. Also, Henry, meal so tedious, Meat Bun doesn't even spend a page describing the spread. Yep. She's like, I can't even bother with this one. It's just not good. Li was still grumbling under his breath. It was quite evident that his ambitions far exceeded Yu's. He had been doted on all his life, after all. The most wasn't good enough for him. He wanted to be the only one. See, I can't, like, he's a kid. Oh God, I'm losing my place. He's a kid, and I can't blame him for being, like, spoiled. And, oh, hi, Cookie. I can't blame him for, like, being spoiled and, like, being bratty and whatever. But I'm like, is he gonna turn out to be an antagonist in the story? Like, legitimately? I'm just talking while I find my place that I lost. Yeah, because I'm like, I'm concerned about that. The most wasn't good enough for him. He wanted to be the only one. I'm like, okay. What does that mean? I don't like that. Yu, on the other hand, didn't attach any importance to such nonsense, because when it came to his family, his heart was dead to begin with. Even if you put a dead heart in a greenhouse, you couldn't warm it up. For his part, He Yu went straight back to the hotel, where he used Executive Huang's privileges to obtain a key card to Xie Qingcheng's room. Even though many unpleasant, unexpected things had taken place today, there was still one fact that made him very happy. Chen Man was gone. Although the scent of alcohol lingered around him for dinner with his mother and his brother, he was completely sober. He checked the time on his phone when he stepped into the elevator. It was already past 10 o'clock. By now, Xie Qingcheng ought to have already washed up and should be getting ready for bed. As He Yu thought about this, for some reason that night in Hangzhou floated up in his mind. He remembered the way Xie Qingcheng had looked in his bathrobe as He Yu pressed him beneath his body and kissed him by mistake. The heart that Liu Jishu hadn't managed to heat up suddenly stirred with warmth. He Yu stood in the dark hallway before the door to Xie Qingcheng's room. When he shamelessly swiped the card, the door opened with a click. It was even darker inside than in the hallway, a nightlight in the depths of the room, the only source of illumination. He Yu was a completely uninvited guest, but perhaps he didn't think of it that way. After all, the way he saw it, he'd fucked Xie Qingcheng before. Why shouldn't he enter his room? However, as soon as he took a step inside, He Yu heard the faint sound of panting and soft, wet noises coming from the bed that lay within the room's murky darkness. He wasn't a virgin anymore. He knew perfectly well what those sounds signified. He immediately froze in shock. This is where we're ending the stream today. Henry, I'm going to take it as a good sign that even you're saying excuse, which means you don't know about this, whatever the spoiler is. So maybe it's not what it seems to be. Okay. I'm going to be very careful not to look at the first lines of the next chapter. I'm just going to look at the chapter title. What? That's not... Okay. This has to be some kind of fake out. When we come back on Wednesday, we will be on chapter 85, which is called We Came Across Another Homicide. So, considering that's the chapter title, I assume that whatever seems to be happening is somehow a fake out and is not really happening. But I don't know. Meat Bun, I guess we're gonna find out on Wednesday. I can't believe I have to stop here. Oh, we can look at the color art. Okay. Henry, you might be acting shocked. You're you god of deception. I think Xie Qingcheng is god of deception in this case, because of how well he's been keeping things hidden. Okay, color art. Okay. All right. Color art time. I see now. I see the context of this. I had, like, not really seen it for very long, but I, like, accidentally saw it while I was, like, flipping pages. And it's really hard to tell in some of the art if Xie Qingcheng, like, wants to be there or not. Like, he's kind of just being still, and he's not really pushing back. So for a brief second, I was like, that's not a consensual kiss in the rain, is it? But no, it was not. Apparently, it was not. So, what even was today? What even is... Not only that, this means that we have the last stream to find out what the deal with the cover art is about. Because apparently they're going to find another dead body, and then seemingly, according to the art, there's going to be like a flood of some sort. I don't even know. All of this has to happen in the next stream. But I'm seriously, I can't believe I was right about something. Xia Ching-chung. See, I see the vision now. Xia Ching-chung is mentally ill. So the blood toxin should be able to control him. But he's reined himself in so well that even with, like, drinking He Yu's blood, he, like, shows the signs that he's fighting against being controlled. And it should control him. But he's still not really able to be controlled. So that way, I think that's good in a way because it kind of keeps things fair. Because I think if He Yu really could just, like, use the blood toxin and control Xia Ching-chung, then we kind of, like, lose a little bit of the tension that we have between them. But but I still feel like, oh my god, I was right about something. And before that, we found out that the whole thing with the woman in the hospital was like, that's a paid actor. And of course now we know that, but we don't know why Xia Ching-chung hired her. Because he still won't be honest about anything, even if he's literally compelled to by blood toxin. So it has really been a day. Well, thank you for coming to the stream, and I will see you all on Wednesday to finish this volume. Yep. Bye.